nights in whispering pines are so quiet you can hear pine needles brushing against each other. Cedar Street rests like an old photograph. Dim amber streetlights, weathered wooden fences, and houses that go to sleep early like older folks after supper. There's no traffic, no music, only wind and the faint scent of pine resin. If anything unusual happens here, it doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, like a memory returning the moment you think you've forgotten it. The sharp clack of the mailbox sounded louder than it should have, as if someone had tapped the front door with a cold finger. Arthur Hale sat in the living room under the warm glow of a table lamp, a half-read newspaper in front of him. He looked up, not rushed, but changed, careful in the way only a man who's heard too much bad news can be. For a moment, the old wooden house seemed to hold its breath. At 72, Arthur didn't fear the dark. He feared what came knocking from the past. Arthur rose slowly and slipped on the heavy coat worn thin at the elbows, the kind you keep for years until it smells like wood in winter. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The night air touched his face, gentle but firm, reminding him the town still moved by its own rhythm, slow, steady, and private. Porch light spilled across the steps, throwing his shadow long over the boards. Arthur walked to the mailbox the way a man walks toward a question no one has answered. Inside the mailbox was only one envelope. It was yellowed like paper kept too long in a drawer, the seal slightly lifting, the stamp old-fashioned, back from the days when people mailed their words instead of texting them. On the front, bold handwriting read, "Arthur Hale, personal." No greeting, no return name, just a familiarity that made no sense, like hearing an old song and knowing the chorus before it arrives. Arthur held the envelope in his hand, light as paper, heavy as a feeling. He carried it into the kitchen where everything stayed the same, a kettle scuffed by time, cabinets that creaked softly, and a wall clock ticking like a patient heartbeat. Arthur laid the envelope beneath the warm yellow light and stared at it as if it were a photograph he needed to be sure was real. He'd opened countless envelopes in his life, summonses, reports, condolences, but this one felt different. It didn't smell like fresh paper. It smelled like time, and a quiet reminder that something had never truly ended. Arthur opened it slowly, as if afraid to tear something fragile. The paper inside was thick and slightly wrinkled, as though it had been folded and unfolded many times, a habit of someone who couldn't decide. When he slid the letter out, the soft rustle sounded too loud in the still kitchen. He didn't read immediately. He studied the ink, the punctuation, the shape of each line, like the handwriting belonged to someone standing in the shadows. Then Arthur took a small breath and began to read with the eyes of a man who once believed every case had an ending. The first line was plain, not dramatic. "If you're reading this, it means I waited too long." Arthur felt a thin chill, not fear, recognition. The tone belonged to someone carrying a secret, calm enough to survive it. The letter mentioned whispering pines, a summer long gone, and a promise Arthur had tucked into the deepest drawer of his memory. Then came a short sentence, underlined, "Start where we ended." Start where we ended. A simple phrase, and yet it found him exactly.
Arthur sat motionless for a long time. Outside the window, night settled over the town like a thin blanket, and the wind moved patiently, stirring the curtain just a little. He read the line again and again, "Where we ended." In his mind, old images began to rise, a dirt road toward the lake, the smell of wet grass, voices calling in a summer night. Arthur had thought age would blur his memory, but memory doesn't disappear, it sleeps. And with the right words, it wakes, whole and clear, as if it never left. Summer of 1972. Arthur didn't speak of it often, but he remembered, like a small scratch on a tabletop, easy to ignore, impossible to erase. Back then, the town was just as quiet, only the people were younger, believing tomorrow would look like today. There was a disappearance, a broken phone call, and a night when Arthur stood by the lake, not knowing if he was staring at the water's surface or watching the truth drift away. The file closed in a way that let people keep living, just not sleeping. This letter had pressed directly on that old scratch. He flipped the envelope again, a reflex of the job that never fully left his hands, and there it was, the detail that made his heart sink. The postmark wasn't old, it was new, just days ago. The paper was aged, the stamp was vintage, but the postmark looked like someone had carried a piece of the past to the counter yesterday. Arthur stared at the date, then back at the handwriting. They didn't belong to the same time. It felt like stepping into a familiar room and noticing one chair moved slightly, small but unmistakable. Someone had been here. Arthur stood and opened the lowest drawer, the one he almost never touched. Inside lay a yellowed case folder, a metal clip lightly rusted, and a bundle of index cards held together with an old rubber band. He set them on the table like he was bringing part of his life back into the light. He didn't need to read every page. Just seeing the folder made him hear the past. Shoes on the station floor, a ceiling fan turning, someone saying, "We're almost done." Done is easy to say when you're young. When you're old, you learn some things are only set aside, never finished. Arthur closed the file, not to forget it, but to carry it. He looked toward the door as if the town itself were calling his name, "Start where we ended." If it was a joke, it was too precise. If it was a plea, it arrived too late. And if it was a trap, then whoever said it knew Arthur couldn't stay still. He took a small notebook and wrote a few words. Cedar Street, the general store, the old phone booth by the road. Places that seemed ordinary, yet in a small town, the truth often hides in the most ordinary things. Arthur put on his coat and tied the knot slowly, like preparing to meet a memory face to face. The door opened and the cold of the night entered like a reminder. Arthur stepped down the porch stairs, the wood creaking softly beneath his feet. Cedar Street was still quiet, but the quiet no longer felt gentle. Now it felt like a secret trying to keep itself silent. He walked slowly, not rushed, because no one can outrun time. Up the road, the amber street light trembled slightly in the wind. Arthur looked toward the center of town, where the general store stood and the old phone booth waited, unused for years. He didn't know what he would find. He only knew the letter had done something age rarely does. It made him begin again. The envelope sat inside Arthur's coat pocket, close to his chest, warmed by the rhythm of his breathing like a small secret. He paused beneath the streetlight and pulled it out, reading the word personal as if it was reading him back. In Whispering Pines, people live on routine and memory, and sometimes something very small, a thin envelope, a fresh postmark, can open a door you locked long ago. Arthur slipped it away again. Then he stepped forward into the darker part of the road, where the real story begins.
You're listening to Midnight Action Stories, thrilling crime tales after dark. If you enjoy these late-night missions, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your questions or theories in the comments below.
The center of Whispering Pines at night isn't loud, but it's never fully asleep. Miller's General Store still keeps one light on out front, casting a soft glow over a wooden sign with faded letters. The air feels like old coffee and baked bread, lingering from earlier hours. Arthur walks slowly along a sidewalk cracked with age, one hand tucked in his coat pocket, as if he's stepping back into a page of his own forgotten journal. In a small town, clues don't hide in strange places, they hide in familiar ones. Inside the store, everything sits in the order of decades. Tall wooden shelves, neatly stacked cans, and a little bell that rings each time the door opens. Near the window, a few older men and women sit around a small table, speaking gently as if saving their breath. They look up at Arthur and nod, the quiet greeting of people who've lived side by side for a lifetime. Arthur doesn't ask questions right away. He orders a weak cup of coffee. In places like this, a story usually begins with patience. When Arthur mentions the name on the envelope, an elderly woman with silver hair stops stirring her tea. She doesn't panic, she simply pauses, like someone who's heard a familiar melody. She says Evelyn Marsh once lived here, long before most people still living in town can clearly remember. That girl had beautiful handwriting, she says, her voice light as wind through curtains. Then she adds softly, almost to herself, in Whispering Pines, mail often arrives late because the sender doesn't want to be found. The sentence lands on the table like a cold coin. Arthur slips the envelope out and lays it on the wooden counter like evidence. He doesn't study the words first, he studies the seal, where time tends to leave its marks. There's a thin crease along the edge, as if it once sat pinched inside a narrow metal slot for years. Part of the adhesive is slightly lifted, not from age, but as though it was opened and resealed with careful hands. Arthur runs a fingertip along the crease, feeling the outline of a secret. At his age, he trusts small details more than anyone's explanation. From behind the counter, a retired postman, folks still call him Frank, steps out slowly. His old postal jacket hangs on a hook, like a memory that refuses to leave. Frank squints at the envelope, not because he can't see, but because he's remembering. He says some letters get stuck for years in locked mailboxes at the old postal annex, a place hardly visited since the town updated its system. But a fresh postmark doesn't happen on its own, Frank says. To get that, someone had to bring it to the counter, recently. Arthur doesn't ask who right away, he asks where. Frank tells him the old postal annex sits behind the small train station, where rows of metal boxes have been locked for years. A long time ago, one box jammed shut and people stopped bothering with it. Arthur writes the location in his notebook, his pen moving slowly but firmly. The elderly woman glances toward the window and murmurs, "That annex is close to the pine line." It sounds meaningless until Arthur's mind catches on. Tonight's pine scent suddenly feels like a thread he can follow. In a small town, where often matters more than who, at least at the beginning. Arthur thanks them and steps outside. The bell above the door rings behind him like a period at the end of a sentence. The wind is colder now, but the town still carries its familiar smells, damp wood and pine. He walks toward the station where trains rarely pass anymore, yet old metal gives a soft rattle when the wind moves through. Streetlights stretch thin yellow lines across the road. Arthur doesn't move fast, but every step has purpose. A late letter doesn't appear by accident. It has to pass through someone's hands, and now he's following the places those hands have touched.
The old postal annex crouches behind the station like a forgotten room in the town's larger house. The wooden door is heavy, the lock rusted, the sign, Postal Annex, bent at one corner. Arthur grips the cold handle and eases the door open. Inside is darkness and the smell of old paper, dust, and metal. He switches on his flashlight, sweeping the beam across rows of mailboxes lined up like quiet mouths that once held 1,000 words. Arthur doesn't feel afraid. He feels returned to his work. Arthur finds the row Frank described. In the lower corner, one mailbox is jammed shut, its narrow slot like a crack in time. He kneels, shines the light in close, and sees something that makes him hold his breath. A thin scratch on the metal edge, matching the crease on the envelope, as if the letter had once been held right here, pinned in this exact place, waiting in darkness for years. Arthur touches the scratch lightly. The metal is cold and silent, but in his mind, everything begins to make sound. Paper rustling, locks clicking, someone whispering, "Not yet." Arthur pulls a stiff paperclip from his pocket, an old habit from a man who once opened more drawers than doors. He slides it into the slot and gently pries. There's no loud noise, only a tiny snap, like a secret finally giving way.
A small square of folded paper slips out, along with a worn coin, its markings almost erased. Arthur picks them up, but doesn't unfold the note right away. He studies the coin first. Small objects like that often outlive words, and sometimes they keep what people tried to forget. Arthur opens the folded paper beneath the flashlight. Only a few lines, short, almost cruel in their simplicity. A tiny symbol in the corner, then a sentence, "Not 1972, not finished." Below it, a string of numbers like coordinates or like directions only someone from this town would understand. Arthur reads slowly, as if the words might vanish. The message doesn't shout, it speaks softly. And sometimes the soft voice is more frightening than the loud one, because it means the writer doesn't need attention. They only need Arthur to understand he has stepped into a story longer than half a century. Arthur stands still between the rows of mailboxes as if he's in a hallway of memory. The flashlight trembles slightly with his breathing. He thinks of 1972, how the file grew heavier day by day, how the truth felt close enough to touch and then slipped away. When he retired, he told himself some things had to be released so the rest of life could be peaceful. But now a single note in a forgotten annex drags him back to that same point. Arthur doesn't feel angry, he feels heavy, like hearing a familiar song that never reaches its ending. He steps outside, breathes in the cold air, and looks toward the pine line in the distance. The night is dark, but not flat. It has depth, like the surface of a lake. Whispering pines' narrow roads curve around forest and water, like lines on an aging palm. Arthur reads the numbers again, and they point toward a place he's avoided for years. A stretch near the lake, where an old phone booth once stood, like a silent witness. He slips the note into his inner pocket, close to his chest, and keeps walking. He no longer has the luxury of pretending the past is gone. The old phone booth is still there, even though no one uses it anymore. The glass is fogged with time, the blue paint peeling, weeds growing around its base as if trying to hide it. Arthur stands before it and listens to the wind crossing the nearby water. He remembers when booths like this held a town's secrets back before every pocket carried a phone. Inside sits a vintage payphone, its coiled cord like a sleeping snake. Arthur doesn't touch it right away. He only stands there, like a man facing a door he once shut with all the confidence of youth. The booth door lets out a long creak when Arthur opens it. The sound carries across the lake like a sigh. Inside smells of old metal and aged plastic. He shines the light, and dust hangs in the beam like floating grains of time. Arthur scans the frame. Scratch marks, faint pencil lines on the wood, and a narrow gap beneath the phone, just big enough to hide something no one would notice. He bends down slowly. He isn't looking for treasure. He's looking for a sign, a reminder that the person who wrote the letter knows this place far too well. Arthur's fingers find a piece of stiff card tucked beneath the payphone base. He pulls it free. It's a small black and white photograph, slightly curled at the corner. The image shows the lake and the wooden bridge, familiar. But what tightens Arthur's throat is the figure in the distance, tall and thin, back turned, wearing a hat. And beneath the photo, in tiny handwriting, are the words, "You stopped looking." Arthur feels that sentence touch an old wound. Not sharp pain, deeper than that. Arthur steps out of the booth, holds the photo at eye level, and looks across the real lake. A thin mist lies on the water, and the wooden bridge stands in the distance, just as the photograph captured it. Past and present overlap like two frames of an old film reel. Arthur realizes the sender isn't only stirring his memory, they're guiding him, step by step, as if this path was planned long ago. He reads the words again, "You stopped looking." And for the first time in years, Arthur understands he's no longer allowed to stand outside the story. The town won't accept peace while the truth is still buried under the water. Arthur walks along the lakeside road where streetlights are fewer and tree shadows are thicker. Pine needles whisper in the wind like a voice that won't fully speak. He thinks about the writer. They know exactly where to hide things, where to wait, and where to touch his memory. That means they belong to this town, or once did. Arthur doesn't feel hunted in a dramatic way. He feels led, like an older man being guided through an old house to see what the walls have been hiding. He tightens his grip on the note inside his pocket, not to keep a secret, but to keep steady. When his watch nears 10 o'clock, Arthur stops beneath an old pine tree. He opens his notebook and writes the annex, the jammed mailbox, the folded note, the phone booth, the photograph. A chain of small details, so small someone else would laugh and say he's imagining things. But Arthur has solved cases, and he knows the truth often begins that way, not with an explosion, but with a quiet trace. He looks toward the wooden bridge again and whispers, barely audible, "All right, I'm looking." And inside that whisper is a new promise, the promise of a man too old to run, but no longer willing to hide. Arthur folds the photo and slides it with the note into his notebook. The flashlight passes over the words one last time, like a final confirmation. Not 1972, not finished. The sentence no longer feels like a threat. It feels like a door opening. Arthur clicks the flashlight off and lets the darkness return, but this time it doesn't swallow him. He stands there listening to wind and water, understanding someone has waited patiently for him to come back. The only question left is why. Did they wait to be saved, or did they wait for Arthur to remember who he failed to see? Arthur returns to Cedar Street when the town has fully settled. Amber streetlights are spaced far apart, like punctuation marks in the dark. A thin fog clings to the wooden fences, making everything look like an old photograph developed again. He steps onto his porch and hears the floorboards creak beneath him, an old sound, usually comforting, but tonight, familiarity doesn't feel simple. In his coat pocket are a black and white photo and a folded note. They're light as paper and heavy as a question finally taking shape. In his small study, Arthur turns on the desk lamp. Warm light falls over the wooden surface and the old case file he pulled from the bottom drawer. The clock watch ticks slowly, as if it's weighing each minute. Arthur places the photo and the folded note beside the 1972 file and sits down. He doesn't rush to turn the pages. A man who once investigated knows the truth doesn't run away. It hides inside the things we glanced past too quickly. Arthur takes a quiet breath, as if reopening a door he once locked with the confidence of youth. The yellowed pages rise beneath Arthur's hands like dried leaves pressed by time. There are faded Polaroids, handwritten index cards, and a town map marked with red circles that have softened with age. He turns to the witness section, last seen, the part everyone reads and assumes they understand. But Arthur studies the detail, a small symbol in the corner, the kind only the team used to mark verified. He once trusted that symbol without question, and because of that, he never questioned it at all, until now. Arthur pulls the folded note from his inner pocket and smooths it flat. The symbol in the corner, small, simple, sharp as a pen, matches the same symbol inside the file. He places a finger on both marks, like fitting two pieces together to see if they belong to the same picture. And then he realizes what makes his throat go dry. The symbol isn't the victim's, it isn't the suspect's. It belongs to someone who worked with him, someone who signed the final report, someone who once said, "We did everything we could." The memory doesn't arrive loudly, it It slides in like the steady hum of a ceiling fan in the old station. Arthur sees the room again, beige walls, wooden desks piled with paper, cold coffee, and the shape of a man standing near the window. The man wasn't memorable, and that's what's dangerous. A colleague, an investigator, a person Arthur trusted the way he trusted the key in his own pocket. Arthur hears that calm, even voice. "Don't dig deeper, Arthur. The town needs peace." Back then, it sounded kind. Now, Arthur wonders if it was an order spoken softly.
Arthur lifts the black and white photo and studies the distant figure in a hat near the wooden bridge. Then he flips to the file's old scene photographs. There's one from back then, nearly the same angle, the same bridge, the same shoreline. But in 1972, Arthur never noticed the figure in the distance. Now he does. A familiar stance, not because of a face, but because of how the person puts weight on one leg, the slight tilt of the shoulders, like someone waiting. Arthur sets the two photos side by side. 2 moments, one silhouette, and one question. How many times did that person stand within his life while he never truly looked? Arthur opens his notebook. The tip of his pen touches the paper more slowly than usual. There are names you can write easily when you're young. When you're old, a name can feel like stone. Arthur writes one down, not large, not dramatic, just enough for himself to read. Then he circles it. In that moment, Arthur doesn't feel victory, he feels regret. Because if the symbol is true, it means he lived an entire life built on a trust that was misplaced. And in a small town, misplaced trust doesn't only ruin a case, it ruins people. Arthur stands and walks to the window. Cedar Street is dark and quiet, as if it has no idea a truth just shifted inside this house. The wind moves through the pines with a sound like someone sighing. Arthur remembers the weeks after 1972. People stopped mentioning it, stopped asking, and eventually acted as if it never happened. He did too. He chose peace, an understandable choice, a human one, especially at that age. But peace can be nothing more than a thin layer of dust over what we didn't have the courage to face. Tonight, that dust is starting to lift. Arthur returns to the desk and picks up the envelope again. He doesn't know why, only that an old instinct tells him to. He runs a finger along the inside seam and feels something thin, an inner lining. Carefully, he separates it. A small slip of paper slides out, holding just one handwritten line, so short it makes his heart skip. "I didn't die in '98. He reads it without blinking, because if that sentence is true, then the sender isn't just alive, they've been somewhere near, watching him for years, and they chose tonight to speak. Arthur sits down slowly, as if afraid his thoughts might fall and shatter. Outside, the town stays quiet, but inside this room, half a century has just opened its eyes. He reads the line, "I didn't die in '98" again, then slips the note into the 1972 file, like placing a new leaf inside an old book. He doesn't know who the sender truly is, a victim, a witness, or a guide. He only knows this is no longer a case from back then. It's a late meeting, and Whispering Pines has just invited him back to the place where everything began. Arthur reads the line again, and then again, as if his eyes need time to believe what they're seeing. "I didn't die in '98. It's a short sentence, yet it tilts the entire room just slightly. If the writer is alive, where have they been all these years? Here in this town, under the same amber streetlights Arthur walks beneath every night? He lays the slip of paper on top of the 1972 file and stares at it like a small stone dropped into still water. Some secrets don't need to shout, they only need to exist.
Arthur doesn't panic. He does what a man who spent a lifetime trusting paperwork would do. He verifies. He opens a drawer and takes out an old magnifying glass and a short pencil. Under the lamp, the ink becomes clearer, tiny pressure marks like a hand trained to hold back. Arthur compares it to the handwriting on the envelope, then to a few notes in the old file. Not identical, but far too close to be coincidence. A thought settles in. Maybe the writer is disguising their hand, or maybe they're testing whether Arthur can still recognize it. Arthur stands and walks to the window. Cedar Street lies still, like a road that never learned how to lie. The night wind stirs the curtain, and the clock keeps ticking with steady patience, reminding him time doesn't take anyone's side. Arthur looks at the dark shapes of the houses and tries to imagine where that living person might be. At a kitchen table like his, on a porch with a metal mailbox, or in a room that never turns on a light. What he feels isn't fear, it's being called, like the town itself is saying, "Enough, Arthur, don't sleep anymore." He returns to the desk, folds the slip carefully, and slides it into the 1972 file. Then Arthur puts on his coat and tucks the envelope into his inner pocket, close to his chest, as if it needs warmth. He opens his notebook to a fresh page and writes, "Postal annex, jammed box, phone booth, wooden bridge." A simple route on paper, but for Arthur, it feels like returning to the fork in his life. He dims the lights, leaving only the desk lamp, a small ember in the room. He pauses and listens to the house breathe, and he understands. Tomorrow, he'll go back to where it all began, not to be a hero, but to be the last witness. Before he moves, Arthur looks one last time. The tiny note sits between old pages like a new leaf dropped into a dusty book. "I didn't die in '98. It explains nothing, yet it opens everything. If that person is alive, why were they silent? Fear? Regret? Or have they been waiting for the right moment? Arthur closes the file gently, like closing a promise. He whispers, barely audible, as if speaking to himself. "All right, this time I'll look all the way through." Outside the window, the wind keeps moving through the pines, carrying the sense that the town has heard him.
You're listening to Midnight Action Stories, thrilling crime tales after dark. If you enjoy these late night missions, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your questions or theories in the comments below.